The salt spray hit Rachel Sterling's face 3 seconds before her eyes opened to sterile white ceiling tiles and the rhythmic beep of hospital monitors. Her throat burned. Smoke inhalation, the nurse would explain later, along with minor burns on her left forearm and a concussion that had kept her unconscious for 6 hours. But in that first moment of waking, all Rachel registered was the absence of something she couldn't name. A presence that had pulled her from darkness into light, strong arms lifting her weight like it was nothing. A voice telling her to stay awake, stay with me, just a little longer. The nurse appeared, kind eyes crinkling above a surgical mask. Portland Memorial Hospital, she explained. October 1st, 8 in the morning. Rachel had been brought in just after 5. A local fisherman had pulled her from the burning yacht Silver Star before it exploded. He'd radioed the Coast Guard, delivered her to the dock where paramedics were waiting, then vanished before anyone could get his name. Rachel's fingers found the call button, pressed it twice. When the nurse returned with water and painkillers, Rachel's question came out as a rasp. "The man who saved me. Where is he?" The nurse shook her head. "He left before the ambulance arrived. Nobody knows who he was." 20 minutes later, Rachel's assistant, Sarah Chen, burst through the door, laptop bag swinging from her shoulder, phone pressed to her ear, finishing a call with the legal team. She disconnected mid-sentence when she saw Rachel sitting up in bed, alive and coherent. The relief on Sarah's face lasted exactly 4 seconds before shifting into the professional efficiency that had made her invaluable for 7 years. "The yacht is total loss. Insurance is already asking questions." The dock security cameras caught the fire starting around 4:20, electrical malfunction in the engine room. "You were asleep in the main cabin." Sarah pulled up footage on her tablet, angled it toward Rachel. "This is the rescue." The video quality was poor, darkness broken only by orange flames reflecting off black water. A small fishing boat appeared in frame, dinghy lowered. A figure, impossible to make out features through the smoke, broke through the yacht's cabin window, disappeared inside for 90 seconds that felt like hours, then emerged carrying Rachel's limp body. The yacht listed hard starboard. The figure moved with practiced efficiency, lowering Rachel into the dinghy, rowing back to the fishing boat with powerful strokes. The yacht exploded 7 seconds after the dinghy cleared the blast radius. Rachel watched the footage 3 times. The rescuer never looked toward the shore cameras, never paused for recognition, just saved her life and left. "We've issued a $25,000 reward," Sarah said. "Press release went out 2 hours ago. Every news outlet in Maine is running the story. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies, rescued by mystery hero who disappeared without a trace." She paused, fingers hovering over the tablet. "It's been 6 hours. Nobody has called." Rachel stared at the frozen frame showing the fishing boat, small and weathered against the burning luxury yacht. $25,000 was pocket change to most people she knew, a month's salary to some, a year's savings to others. Who walks away from that kind of money after risking their life? "Someone who can't afford to be found," Rachel said quietly. Sarah looked up, sharp. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet." Rachel swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignored the dizziness that followed. "But I'm going to find out." The doctor wanted to keep her for observation. Rachel signed herself out against medical advice, which surprised exactly no one who knew her. By noon, she was in the back of a town car heading to her rental property in Cape Elizabeth, phone pressed to her ear with David Reynolds on the line. Reynolds ran a private investigation firm she'd used twice before for corporate due diligence. Thorough, discreet, expensive. "I need you to find someone," Rachel said. "Fisherman. Operates out of Seaside Cove or nearby. Would have been on the water around 4:30 this morning. Boat is small, working vessel, nothing fancy. He would have called in a mayday around 5. Reynolds was quiet for 3 seconds. "That's not much to go on." "It's what I have. $25,000 is being offered publicly. He hasn't claimed it. That tells us something. Tells us he doesn't want to be found. Which is exactly why I need you to find him. Rachel watched the Maine coastline blur past, rocky shores and pine forests.
And Reynolds, this stays between us. No connection to Sterling Technologies. You're doing background for a private citizen. Understood. I'll need a few days. Rachel ended the call and leaned back against leather seats that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her head throbbed. The burns on her arm pulsed with each heartbeat. She closed her eyes and saw the moment again, waking in the smoke-filled cabin, lungs screaming, the door blocked by debris. Then hands on her shoulders, strong and certain, a voice cutting through her panic. You're okay. I've got you. The smell of engine oil and salt water, calloused palms supporting her weight. She'd spent 20 years building Sterling Technologies from a garage startup to a multinational corporation worth $3.2 billion. She'd negotiated with senators and foreign ministers, survived hostile takeover attempts, outmaneuvered competitors who'd tried to bury her. She knew how to read people, how to find leverage, how to get what she wanted. But she had no idea how to find a ghost who saved lives and disappeared. 3 days later, Reynolds called with his preliminary report. Nothing. The Coast Guard had a record of the distress call, male voice, no identification given, reported a yacht fire and requested immediate medical assistance at the Seaside Cove public dock. The call had come from a marine radio, impossible to trace to a specific vessel. The dock security footage showed Rachel being transferred to the ambulance, but the fishing boat that had brought her in was already gone. Harbormaster's log showed no unusual activity that morning, which meant whoever had brought her in hadn't formally docked. I've got 12 registered fishermen and boat mechanics working out of Seaside Cove, Reynolds said. I can run background checks, but if this guy doesn't want to be found, he's not going to sit still for an interview. Rachel sat in her temporary office, laptop open to Sterling Technologies' quarterly projections. The board meeting was in 4 days. Her executive team expected her to be in Boston by tomorrow to review the acquisition proposal Derek Morrison had been pushing for 3 months. Normal life pulling her back into its orbit. I'll handle the interviews myself, she heard herself say. Reynolds paused. You're going to Seaside Cove? Yes. With respect, Miss Sterling, that's not the most efficient use of your time. Rachel looked at her calendar, color-coded blocks representing millions of dollars in decisions, hundreds of employees depending on her strategic vision. Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks? The board meeting, Derek can handle it. That's why we pay him. Rachel closed the laptop. Book me a place to stay in Seaside Cove. Something low-key. I'm doing research for a book on coastal communities. The lie came easily. She'd been lying to herself for 20 years, telling herself that the next deal, the next milestone, the next billion would fill the hollow space where connection should be, where family should be. She built an empire and woke up every morning in an empty penthouse with no one to call except her assistant. But a stranger had risked his life for her without knowing who she was or what she could offer. That kind of action didn't make sense in Rachel's world, where everything was transaction and leverage. She needed to understand it, needed to understand him. Seaside Cove looked like every other Maine fishing village trying to hold on to its working-class roots against the tide of vacation homes and boutique restaurants. Population 3,000, 2/3 of whom disappeared after Labor Day when the summer people went back to Boston and New York. Rachel arrived on a Thursday afternoon in early October, the air sharp with the promise of winter, maple trees already turning gold and red along the coast road. Betty Morrison ran the bed and breakfast on Harbor Street, white clapboard building with blue shutters, vegetable garden in back, view of the docks from every window. She showed Rachel to a room on the second floor, modest and clean, quilts on the bed that someone's grandmother had stitched by hand. You're the writer Sarah mentioned? Betty asked, setting fresh towels on the dresser. Rachel had rehearsed this. Working on a book about coastal culture,
How fishing communities are adapting to economic changes. Betty's expression suggested she'd heard variations of this story before. Every summer person who showed up thinking they could capture the soul of a place in 3 chapters and a photo essay. But she was gracious about it, main polite, and pointed Rachel toward Murphy's Diner for the best coffee and the most reliable source of local information. Murphy's occupied a corner lot with windows facing the harbor. Rachel pushed through the door just after 6 on her second morning in town, when the breakfast rush was winding down and the fishermen who'd been out since 4 were settling in with coffee and newspapers. She took a booth in the back, ordered eggs and toast she didn't want, and listened. The conversation flowed around her, easy and familiar. Someone's boat engine needed a carburetor rebuild. Someone else's daughter was pregnant with her 3rd. The high school football team had lost their homecoming game. Normal life, the kind Rachel had never had even before Sterling Technologies consumed every waking hour. Her parents, both lawyers, both workaholics, had raised her on takeout and broken promises, present in body, but absent in everything that mattered. On the 3rd morning, Rachel shifted her approach. She sat at the counter instead of a booth, close enough to the regulars to seem approachable. An older woman with steel gray hair and weathered hands glanced over, nodded greeting. Rachel nodded back. "You're the writer staying at Betty's place," the woman said. Statement, not question. "Researching coastal communities." Rachel sipped coffee that was better than anything she could get in Manhattan. "I'm interested in how traditional fishing culture survives economic pressure." The woman's eyes crinkled. "That's a fancy way of asking if we're dying out." "Are you?" "We're adapting, like we always do." She extended a hand. "Martha Cole. My husband runs the boat repair shop." They talked for 20 minutes. Martha had lived in Seaside Cove her entire life, 63 years. She'd seen the sardine cannery close, the paper mill shut down, the summer people buy up half the waterfront, but the core remained. Families who'd fished these waters for generations, who knew every rock and current, who helped each other through hard winters and harder losses. Rachel steered the conversation carefully toward the yacht fire, watching Martha's face for reaction. "I heard there was some excitement a few weeks ago. A rescue?" Martha's expression shifted, subtle but definite. "You heard about that?" "Small town. Word travels. The person who did it doesn't want attention." Martha's tone carried warning beneath the politeness. "We respect that here." Rachel filed that away. Not just someone avoiding publicity. Someone the community was actively protecting. She changed subjects, asked about winter preparations, let Martha relax again. But the message was clear. Seaside Cove knew who the mystery rescuer was, and they weren't telling outsiders. The next 3 days, Rachel spent integrating herself into the town's rhythm. She showed up at Murphy's every morning, learned names, asked questions that had nothing to do with burning yachts. She bought locally caught fish at the dock. She attended a town council meeting about zoning regulations. She became a familiar face, the writer from away who was trying, at least, to understand. On the 7th day, Walt Morrison sat down across from her at Murphy's without asking. He was 72, she'd learned, a retired fisherman who still went out occasionally to check his traps. He had a face carved by wind and salt, eyes that missed nothing. "You're looking for someone," he said without preamble. Rachel met his gaze, decided on honesty. "I'm the person who was pulled from that yacht." Walt nodded slowly. "Figured as much. Sarah Chen isn't a common name, and your assistant used it when she booked Betty's place. Took me about 5 minutes on Google." "Then you know I owe someone my life." "And you're here to pay that debt." "I'm here to say thank you." Walt picked up his coffee, drank, set it down precisely in the center of the saucer. "The person who pulled you out doesn't want thanks, doesn't want money, doesn't want his name in the papers." "Why not?" "That's his business." Rachel leaned forward. $25,000 is still being offered. Nobody is called. That kind of money could change lives in a town this size. Some things cost more than money can fix, Walt said quietly. They sat in silence for 30 seconds. The diner sounds continued around them, dishes clattering, conversation, the hiss of the coffee machine. Rachel thought about the last 20 years, every relationship she'd traded for business success, every connection she'd let atrophy because quarterly earnings mattered more than birthday calls. "I'm not going to expose him," she said finally. "I just need to understand why." Walt studied her face, looking for something. Whatever he saw, it must have been enough. "The library," he said. "Afternoon reading sessions for kids. You might find what you're looking for there." He stood, left $3 on the table for coffee he hadn't finished, and walked out. Seaside Cove Public Library occupied an old Victorian house on Maple Street, all angles and gables painted soft yellow. Rachel arrived at 2:30, pushed through doors into the smell of old books and floor polish. The children's section was in the back, low tables and bright cushions, shelves at kid height. A girl sat alone at one of the tables, maybe 8 years old, brown skin and blonde curls pulled back in a ponytail, absorbed completely in whatever she was drawing. Rachel drifted closer, pretending to browse the picture books nearby. The girl's artwork was remarkable for her age, detailed, expressive, clearly the work of someone with natural talent. She was using colored pencils to render a seascape, fishing boats on dark water, waves breaking against rocks. The technique was raw, but the composition was sophisticated, understanding of light and shadow that usually took years to develop. Rachel found herself genuinely impressed. She moved closer, just enough to see better. The girl looked up, met her eyes without shyness. "That's beautiful work," Rachel said. The girl smiled, gap-toothed and proud. "Thank you. I like to draw what I see." "Do you come here often?" "Every Saturday. Dad picks me up at 3. Rachel pulled out a chair, gestured permission to sit. The girl nodded. Up close, Rachel could see more drawings spread across the table, boats, seagulls, the harbor at different times of day. One caught her attention, darker than the others. Orange flames erupting from a sleek yacht, black smoke billowing, a small boat approaching through the chaos, 2 figures, one carrying the other. Rachel's pulse quickened. "That one is different." The girl picked it up carefully, protective. "I saw this from my bedroom window. It woke me up at 4:30 in the morning. The boom was so loud." Rachel kept her voice level, casual. "That must have been scary." "A little, but I knew Dad would handle it." The words fell into place like puzzle pieces clicking home. "Your dad?" "He went out on his boat, rowed to the fire, and saved someone." The girl's voice carried simple pride. "He brought her back safe." Rachel's throat tightened. "That was very brave." "Dad's always brave." The girl looked at the drawing again, then at Rachel, something shifting in her expression, recognition dawning. "Wait. You're the person in the news, the one he saved." Rachel saw no point in denying it. "Yes." The girl's eyes widened. "But Dad said it was private. He said I couldn't tell anyone." "Why did he say that?" "I don't know. He just looked really worried when the news came on TV, talking about the reward." The girl bit her lip. "I'm not supposed to say anything. He'll be upset if he knows I told you." Rachel leaned forward, keeping her voice gentle. "I won't tell him we talked. But can I ask your name?" The girl hesitated, loyalty and politeness warring on her face. "Emma. Emma Carter." "It's nice to meet you, Emma." Rachel extended her hand. They shook, formal and serious. "Your dad sounds like a good man." "He's the best." Emma started gathering her drawings, checking the clock. "I have to go. He picks me up at 3 and he's never late." Rachel stood, moved to the window that overlooked the street. At 3 on the dot, a battered pickup truck pulled to the curb. The driver's door opened and a man climbed out,
Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the economy of someone who'd spent years doing physical work. Black skin, graying hair at the temples, wearing canvas work jacket and jeans worn soft at the knees. He turned toward the library, and Rachel saw his face.
Strong features, eyes that carried weight, the kind of presence that came from weathering storms, both literal and metaphorical. She didn't recognize him. The smoke and darkness had obscured too much, but something in her chest recognized the competence, the quiet strength. Emma burst through the library doors and ran to him. He caught her, swung her up despite her size, held her close for 3 seconds before setting her down. The gesture was pure love, unself-conscious and complete. They talked for a moment, Emma gesturing animatedly. The man glanced toward the library, but Rachel had already stepped back from the window. She waited 5 minutes before leaving, giving them time to drive away. Then she walked back to Betty's place and called David Reynolds. "James Carter," she said when he answered. 42 years old, works as a boat mechanic, lives in Seaside Cove with his daughter Emma. I need everything you can find. Reynolds was quiet for 2 beats. "You found him." "His daughter found me, or I found her. Either way, I need background, discreet as possible." "Give me until tomorrow morning." Rachel stood on Betty's porch, looking out at the harbor where fishing boats rocked at anchor. 20 years of business had taught her how to leverage information, how to turn knowledge into advantage. But standing there, watching the sun sink toward the water, she felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty about what came next. James Carter had saved her life and walked away from recognition and money. His daughter had accidentally revealed his identity. Now Rachel knew who he was, where he worked, where he lived. She had all the information she needed to corner him, force a confrontation, make him accept her gratitude whether he wanted it or not. But Walt's words echoed in her mind. Some things cost more than money can fix. Rachel went inside, made herself tea, opened her laptop to review the reports Sarah had forwarded about Sterling Technologies' quarterly performance. The numbers were good. Derek Morrison had handled the board meeting competently. The company was running fine without her constant attention. She closed the laptop without responding to any of the emails. The next morning, Reynolds sent his report. James Morrison Carter, born July 1982 in Portland, Maine. Navy service from 2000 to 2010. Honorable discharge. Married Sarah Walsh in 2008. Daughter Emma, born 2016. Sarah died from breast cancer in 2021 after 2 years of treatment. James had been working as a marine mechanic since leaving the Navy, currently employed at Coles Marine Repair. He owned a small house on Harbor Road and a 30-year-old fishing boat called Second Chance. The final section of the report made Rachel's chest tighten. Current custody dispute with Robert and Catherine Walsh, maternal grandparents of Emma Carter. The Walshes were pursuing full custody, arguing that James lacked financial stability to provide adequate care. Court date scheduled for November 11th, 4 weeks away. Reynolds had attached financial records. James's annual income from Coles Marine was $42,000. He supplemented it with occasional fishing income, maybe another $8,000 yearly. His wife's cancer treatment had left him with $30,000 in medical debt, still being paid off in monthly installments. His mortgage was 3 months behind. The custody petition cited these facts as evidence of inadequacy. But the attached documents also showed something the Walsh's lawyers had either missed or chosen to ignore. Every payment James made went through, even if late. Every bill got paid. He was drowning in debt, but still treading water, refusing to go under. And then there was Emma's medical file. Diagnosed with mitral valve prolapse 6 months ago. Moderate to severe. Surgery recommended within the year, preferably sooner. Estimated cost, $120,000. Insurance would cover 60%. Out-of-pocket responsibility, $48,000.
James Carter's total savings, according to the bank records Reynolds had managed to access, $12,000. Rachel sat back, understanding clicking into place. James had been offered $25,000, more than half of what he needed for his daughter's surgery. He turned it down because accepting it meant publicity, meant the Walshes knowing about it, meant ammunition for their argument that he was financially unstable and opportunistic. He'd chosen potential death for his daughter over the risk of losing custody. The scope of that choice stunned her. Rachel had made hard decisions, sacrificed relationships and health for business success, but she'd never faced a choice where both options led to losing everything. She found Cole's Marine on Harbor Road, a weathered building with peeling paint and a gravel parking lot. The sign out front advertised boat repairs, engine service, winter storage. Rachel pushed through the door into the smell of motor oil and fiberglass resin. A man in his mid-40s looked up from the counter, wiped his hands on a rag. "Help you?" "I'm interested in engine repair services. I am considering purchasing a boat." "What kind of engine you looking at?" Rachel had done her research. "Probably a 4-stroke outboard, something reliable for coastal cruising." The man, his name tag said Peter, nodded toward the back. "James is our best engine guy. Let me grab him." Rachel's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. Professional, just another potential customer. James appeared from the workshop, wiping grease from his hands. He wore coveralls over a faded navy t-shirt, work boots worn smooth at the toes. His eyes met Rachel's, and she saw the recognition hit him like a physical blow. He froze for half a second, then his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. "I can help you with that," he said, voice even. They stood 3 feet apart. The last time they'd been this close, Rachel had been unconscious, and James had been carrying her to safety. Now they were strangers in a boat repair shop, pretending they'd never met. "What can I tell you about 4-stroke engines?" James asked. Rachel played along, asked technical questions she'd memorized. James answered with professional competence, explaining fuel efficiency and maintenance requirements. Anyone watching would see a mechanic talking to a potential customer, but underneath the words, a different conversation was happening. 2 people acknowledging a debt neither wanted to name. Rachel's eyes caught on a child's drawing pinned to the wall behind James's workstation. The yacht fire rendered in colored pencil. Emma's work. "Your daughter draws very well," Rachel said quietly. James's shoulders tensed. "She likes to capture what she sees." "She saw a lot that morning." "Yes." They stood in silence for 5 seconds. The professional distance collapsed. James glanced toward Peter at the front counter, then gestured toward a side door. "Let me show you some engine options we have in stock." The storage area was cramped, smelling of gasoline and marine varnish. James closed the door behind them. When he turned back to Rachel, the careful neutrality was gone. "You shouldn't be here." "I know who you are." Rachel kept her voice low. "I know what you did. And I'm asking you to forget it. $25,000 is still—" "I know." James's voice carried quiet desperation. "I know what it could buy. I know what it could fix. But I can't take it. Because of the custody case." James closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the exhaustion there was profound. "You've done your homework." I needed to understand why someone would walk away from that much money after risking their life. "Now you understand. So please, leave it alone." Rachel studied his face, seeing the calculation he'd made. Publicity meant the Walshes knowing he'd rescued a billionaire, which would feed their narrative that he was irresponsible and opportunistic. The reward money would look like a payoff. Every good thing he'd done would be twisted into evidence against him. "What if I could help without it being connected to the rescue?" Rachel asked. "Sterling Foundation has pediatric cardiac emergency grants. Emma would qualify." James's jaw tightened. Same problem. The timing would be suspicious. Walsh's lawyers would claim it was a payoff for saving you. Not if we structured it properly. There's no structure that makes this work. James's voice rose slightly, then dropped back to controlled quiet. Any help from you, any connection between us, destroys me in court.
They'll say I'm using Emma's condition to cultivate relationships with wealthy people. They'll say I'm unstable, opportunistic, willing to risk everything for money. But you're willing to risk Emma's life instead? The words came out harder than Rachel intended. James flinched like she'd struck him. That's not fair. No, it's not. Rachel felt something crack in her chest, 20 years of careful control fracturing. But it's the choice you're making. James's hands curled into fists at his sides, not threatening, just holding on. I'm making the choice to keep my daughter, to be her father, because without me, she'll have money for surgery, but she won't have anyone who loves her for who she is instead of what she represents. The Walshes love her. They love the idea of her, Sarah's legacy, their second chance at raising a daughter after they drove theirs away with expectations and disappointment. James's voice carried old pain. My wife spent 3 years not talking to her parents because they couldn't accept that she chose a Navy mechanic over law school. They only reconciled after Emma was born, and when Sarah got sick, they tried to use it as leverage to control how we handled treatment. Rachel absorbed this, pieces falling into place. They want to save Emma by taking her from you. They want to save their vision of who Emma should be. Private schools, piano lessons, the life Sarah rejected. James looked at the concrete floor, then back at Rachel. I can't fight them with money. I can only fight them by being present, by being the parent who shows up every day. And if publicity makes me look opportunistic or unstable, I lose that fight. Rachel understood corporate warfare, hostile takeovers, battles fought with lawyers and leverage. But this was different. This was a man protecting his child with the only weapon he had, his presence, his love, his absolute refusal to compromise on what mattered. So what do you want from me? James asked quietly. Rachel had come here with a plan. Thank him, offer help, leverage her resources to solve his problems. But standing in this cramped storage room, she realized her plan was useless. James Carter didn't need her money. He needed her to disappear. I want to understand how you do it, she said instead. How you choose between two impossible options. James's expression softened fractionally. You don't. You just make the choice that lets you sleep at night and hope it's enough. Rachel pulled a business card from her wallet, held it out. If anything changes, if there's ever a way I can help that won't destroy you in court. James took the card, looked at it, slipped it into his coverall pocket. Thank you for understanding why I can't take it. Rachel left Cole's Marine and walked back to Betty's place through October sunshine that felt colder than it should. Her phone buzzed with messages from Sarah. The board wanted her input on the Techron acquisition. Derek needed a decision on the European expansion. Investors were asking about her timeline for return. The normal world pulling her back. But Rachel found herself resisting the pull. She'd come to Seaside Cove to find the man who saved her life. She'd found him. She'd offered help and been rejected. The logical next step was to return to New York, get back to running her company, let James Carter fight his battles alone. But something kept her in place. Not obligation anymore. Something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. She saw in James Carter a version of sacrifice she'd never considered. Choosing to be present over providing. Choosing love over logic. Choosing the long, hard road because it was the only one that preserved what mattered most. Rachel had spent 20 years optimizing every aspect of her life for efficiency and profit. She'd sacrificed presence for provision, connection for convenience, and she'd ended up alone in a burning yacht with no one to miss her if she died.
James Carter had nothing except a daughter who adored him and the community that protected him without being asked. Rachel sat on Betty's porch as afternoon faded into evening, watching fishing boats return to harbor. Her laptop remained closed. Her phone stayed silent. For the first time in 2 decades, she wasn't sure what decision would maximize value or minimize risk. She only knew she wasn't ready to leave. Rachel extended her stay at Betty's place for another week, then another. Sarah's emails grew increasingly pointed. The board wanted Rachel in Boston. Derek was making decisions without consulting her. Investors were starting to ask questions about leadership stability. Rachel responded to each message with variations of the same answer. She was handling a personal matter and would return when it was resolved. The lie tasted bitter, but served its purpose. Sterling Technologies had consumed 20 years of her life. It could survive 3 weeks without her constant attention. Seaside Cove revealed itself slowly to someone willing to stay. Rachel learned the rhythm of the fishing boats departing before dawn, engines rumbling across dark water. She learned which mornings Walt Morrison would be at Murphy's and which days he'd be out checking his traps. She learned that Emma Carter walked to school with 2 friends who lived on her street, that James picked her up every afternoon at 3:15, never late, never making excuses. Rachel found herself at Murphy's most mornings, coffee and toast, listening to conversations that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market share. Martha Cole talked about her granddaughter's college applications. Peter complained about supply chain delays on boat parts. Walt discussed the weather patterns with the confidence of someone who'd spent 70 years reading the sky. On her 14th day in town, Emma appeared at Rachel's table during Saturday breakfast rush, art supplies tucked under her arm. "Can I sit here? All the other tables are full." Rachel gestured to the empty seat. Emma settled in, pulled out a sketchbook, started drawing the harbor view through the window. They sat in comfortable silence for 10 minutes before Emma spoke without looking up from her work. "Dad doesn't know I told you who he was. At the library. I won't mention it." "Good." Emma's pencil moved across paper, capturing the curve of a fishing boat's hull. "He's been worried lately. More than usual." Rachel sipped coffee, keeping her tone casual. "About what?" "The court thing with Grandma and Grandpa Walsh. They want me to live with them in Boston." Emma's hand stilled on the paper. "I don't want to go, but Dad says it's complicated." Rachel had read the custody filing Reynolds provided. Robert and Catherine Walsh weren't monsters. They were grandparents who genuinely believed they could provide a better life for their granddaughter. Better schools, better health care, better opportunities. They saw James's financial struggles and concluded that love wasn't enough when a child's future was at stake. They weren't entirely wrong. They just weren't entirely right either. "Your dad loves you very much," Rachel said carefully. "I know," Emma resumed drawing. "That's why I'm scared." "Why would that make you scared?" "Because sometimes loving someone means letting them go. That's what happened with Mom." Emma's voice stayed steady, but her grip on the pencil tightened. "She loved us so much, she fought the cancer for 2 extra years. The doctor said it was too advanced, that treatment would just make her sick. But she did it anyway, because she didn't want to leave us." Rachel's throat constricted. That was brave. It was, but it also meant she was in pain the whole time. And Dad had to watch her suffer because she loved us too much to stop fighting. Emma looked up finally, eyes too old for 8 years. "So yeah, I'm scared Dad will decide that letting me go to Boston is the loving thing to do, even if it breaks his heart." The insight was devastating in its clarity. Rachel had built a career on understanding human motivation, predicting behavior, finding leverage. But this child had articulated a fear Rachel hadn't fully grasped, that James might lose not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to sacrifice himself if he thought it would benefit his daughter. Emma finished her drawing, packed up her supplies as James's truck pulled to the curb outside. She hopped down from the booth, then paused. "You like Dad, right? As a person, I mean. Rachel chose her words carefully. I think he's remarkable. Then maybe you could help him see that staying together is better than being apart, even if we're poor. Emma slung her backpack over her shoulder. Just a thought. She left before Rachel could respond. Through the window, Rachel watched Emma climb into the truck, watched James ruffle her hair affectionately before pulling away from the curb. The gesture was so ordinary, so suffused with casual love, that Rachel felt its absence in her own life like a physical ache. Her phone buzzed. Sarah again, this time with an urgent flag. Rachel stepped outside to take the call. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. Derek's pushing for a vote on the Techron acquisition without you present. Sarah's voice carried uncharacteristic stress. He's arguing that your extended absence demonstrates lack of commitment to strategic decision-making. Rachel leaned against Murphy's brick wall, October wind cutting through her jacket. That's not how board votes work. He can't force a decision without quorum. He has 5 board members lined up. You need to be there, or he gets his way by default. The Techron acquisition was Derek's pet project, a horizontal integration that would expand Sterling Technologies' market share, but required taking on significant debt. Rachel had opposed it in 3 separate meetings, argued for organic growth instead of leveraged expansion. Derek saw it as conservative thinking, failure to capitalize on opportunities. Tell them I'll call in remotely. Rachel, Sarah's tone shifted, less assistant and more friend. What are you doing? You've never missed a board meeting in 15 years, and now you're camping out in a town of 3,000 people for what? Some guy you met once? I'm figuring something out. Figure it out faster, because Derek is positioning this as a referendum on your leadership. If you don't come back soon, there might not be a company left to run. Rachel ended the call and walked down to the public dock, where fishing boats rocked at anchor and seagulls fought over scraps. She'd built Sterling Technologies with the single-minded focus that had defined her entire adult life. Every decision optimized for growth, every relationship evaluated for strategic value, every hour accounted for in terms of productivity. And it had worked. She was a billionaire CEO with power and influence that most people could only imagine. But standing on this weathered dock in coastal Maine, watching regular people live their modest lives with more genuine connection than she'd experienced in decades, Rachel couldn't remember the last time she'd felt anything resembling contentment. She called Sarah back. Set up the remote connection for tomorrow's meeting. And Sarah? Start looking into Sterling Foundation's grant criteria. I want to understand what would qualify someone for emergency medical assistance without it looking suspicious. Sarah was quiet for 3 beats. You're still trying to help him. He won't take direct help, but maybe there's an indirect path. Rachel, you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save everyone, just the one person who saved me. The board meeting the next morning was a masterclass in corporate maneuvering. Derek presented the Techron acquisition as a once-in-a-generation opportunity, backed by market analysis and growth projections that looked compelling on paper. Rachel countered remotely, her face on the conference room screen, arguing that taking on $200 million in debt during an uncertain economic climate was reckless gambling disguised as bold leadership. The vote split 6-5 in Rachel's favor. Barely. Derek's expression on the video feed told her this wasn't over. He was building support, positioning himself as the forward-thinking executive versus her conservative caution. After the meeting ended, Derek called her directly. Where exactly are you? Maine. Personal matter. Personal matter that's more important than a $200 million acquisition? Derek's voice carried calculated concern. Rachel, the board is starting to question your priorities. I'm trying to protect you here, but I can't do that if you keep disappearing. Rachel looked out Betty's window at the harbor, where James's fishing boat was motoring out for the afternoon. The acquisition can wait. The company's fine. The company is fine because I'm holding things together, but I can't do that indefinitely. Then don't. I'll be back when I'm ready. And when will that be? Rachel didn't have an answer. She ended the call and opened her laptop to the Sterling Foundation portal, reading through grant criteria with new attention. Emergency medical grants require documentation of financial hardship, proof of immediate medical need, and demonstration that the family had exhausted other options. Emma qualified on every metric. But James was right. The timing would be suspicious. The Walsh's lawyers would argue it was a payoff, evidence of improper influence, unless Rachel could find a way to structure the grant that didn't trace back to her personal involvement. She spent 2 hours drafting scenarios, testing approaches, looking for clean solutions. None existed. The problem wasn't mechanical, it was fundamental. Any help she provided would be tainted by their connection, by the timing, by the sheer coincidence that the CEO of Sterling Technologies just happened to be rescued by the father of a child who desperately needed funding that Sterling Foundation could provide. Rachel closed her laptop in frustration just as Betty knocked on her door. "You've got a visitor, James Carter. Says he needs to talk to you." Rachel's pulse spiked. She followed Betty downstairs to find James standing in the front parlor, work clothes and tension written across his shoulders. Betty disappeared discreetly into the kitchen. "We need to talk. Not here." James's voice was tight. Rachel grabbed her jacket and followed him outside. They walked in silence to the public dock, finding privacy at the far end where no boats were moored. The October afternoon was cold, clouds building in the east promising rain. James spoke without preamble. Emma's school called. She collapsed during recess. They're taking her to Portland Memorial now. The words hit Rachel like physical blows. "What happened?" Her heart. "The valve prolapse is getting worse." James's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, checked for messages. The school nurse said her heartbeat was irregular. Said she was conscious but in pain. "You should be on your way to Portland." "My truck's dead. Battery finally gave out." James laughed, bitter and broken. "I called Walt, but he's out on his boat and won't be back for an hour. Peter's in Portland already, picking up parts. The ambulance took Emma 20 minutes ago, and I'm stuck here trying to figure out how to get to my daughter." Rachel didn't hesitate. "My rental car, I'll drive you." James started to protest, pride warring with desperation, but Rachel was already moving toward Betty's place where the sedan was parked. James followed, climbing into the passenger seat without further argument. Rachel drove fast but controlled, years of precise decision-making translating into steady navigation through coastal roads that wound between forest and shore. James sat rigid beside her, phone gripped in white-knuckled hands, waiting for updates that didn't come. 40 minutes into the drive, his phone rang. He answered, listened, went pale. "How bad?" "No, I understand. I'll be there in 20 minutes." He disconnected, stared straight ahead. "They need to operate. Tonight if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest. The valve is failing faster than they expected." Rachel's jaw tightened. "How much time does she have?" "Dr. Morrison said 24 to 48 hours before it becomes critical." James's voice cracked. "I knew it was getting worse. I knew we were running out of time. But I thought we had months, not hours." Rachel took the next turn faster than she should have, tires protesting. "What did the hospital say about cost?" "The same numbers as before. 120,000 total. Insurance covers 72. I need to put down 10,000 as a deposit before they'll schedule the surgery." "You have 12,000 in savings." James's head whipped toward her. "How do you know that?" Rachel kept her eyes on the road. "I had you investigated. I'm sorry, but I needed to understand the full situation." James should have been angry. Instead, he just slumped back against the seat, exhausted. "Then you know I'm 2,000 short of what I need." "You could sell your boat." "The boat's worth maybe 15,000 if I find the right buyer, but that takes time, and I need the income to pay the mortgage and medical bills after the surgery." James closed his eyes. I've been running the numbers every way I can think of. There's no good solution. They drove in silence for 5 minutes. Then Rachel said quietly, "Let me help. Just this once. I can cover the deposit." "No." "James," I said no. His voice was firm despite the desperation underneath. "The custody hearing is 3 weeks away. If the Walshes find out I accepted money from you, they'll crucify me with it. They'll say I exploited Emma's condition to cultivate a relationship with a billionaire. They'll say I'm opportunistic and unstable." "They won't find out." "Everything comes out in court. Their lawyers will subpoena financial records. They'll see a $10,000 payment from Rachel Sterling or Sterling Technologies or whatever account you use, and they'll destroy me with it." Rachel merged onto I-295, Portland skyline visible in the distance. What if it wasn't traceable to me? There's no such thing as untraceable when lawyers are involved. Then what's your plan? James didn't answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I'm going to tell the hospital I need 24 hours to get the deposit together. I'm going to call everyone I know and ask for loans. Walt, Peter, Martha, everyone at Coles Marine. Maybe I can scrape together 2,000 more. And if you can't? Then I sign over custody to the Walshes temporarily. Medical necessity. They have the money. They can authorize the surgery immediately." James's hands curled into fists. "And then I fight like hell to get her back after she's recovered." The strategy was sound from a purely logical standpoint. Emma would get the surgery she needed, James would have time to get his finances in order, and the custody battle would continue on different grounds. But Rachel heard what James wasn't saying. That temporary custody had a way of becoming permanent. That judges were reluctant to disrupt a child's stability once it was established. That this might be the beginning of the end. They reached Portland Memorial just after 5. James was out of the car before Rachel finished parking, sprinting toward the emergency entrance. Rachel followed at a distance, giving him space but staying close enough to help if needed. The cardiac ICU waiting room was sterile and cold. Fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. James spoke with nurses, signed forms, disappeared into Emma's room. Rachel sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and waited. 30 minutes later, an older couple arrived, well-dressed, moving with the confidence of people accustomed to being taken seriously. The woman was elegant despite her obvious distress. Gray hair styled perfectly, expensive coat. The man was tall and stern, lawyers bearing even in crisis. Robert and Catherine Walsh. Rachel recognized them from the photos in Reynolds's report. They spoke briefly with the nurses, then were escorted back to Emma's room. Rachel heard raised voices, muffled by distance and walls, but couldn't make out words. 10 minutes later, James emerged, looking shattered. He collapsed into the chair beside Rachel. "They want to take emergency custody. Tonight. They've already called their lawyer." Rachel's hands clenched. "Can they do that?" "Dr. Morrison says Emma needs surgery within 48 hours. I don't have the deposit. The Walshes can write the check right now." James pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "They're not wrong. They can give Emma what she needs, and I can't." "Money isn't the same as family." "Money is what keeps kids alive when their hearts are failing." Rachel stood, paced 3 steps, turned back. "Give me 10 minutes." She walked to a quiet corner and called Sarah, who answered on the first ring. "I need $10,000 transferred to Portland Memorial Hospital immediately. Patient name, Emma Carter. It needs to look like it's coming from the Sterling Foundation Emergency Grant Program." "Rachel, we can't process grants that fast. There's a review board, criteria verification, approval chain. I don't care about normal procedures. This is life or death. Even if I could do it, which I can't without triggering multiple compliance flags, it would still be traceable to you. The foundation is your organization." "Then what good is having billions if I can't help one 8-year-old girl?" Sarah's voice softened. "You can help her. Just not this way. not without destroying her father in the process. Rachel wanted to argue, to find the leverage point that would make this work, but Sarah was right. Every path led back to the same problem. Rachel's involvement would poison any help she provided. She returned to James, who was staring at the floor. "I can't make this work without hurting you." "I know." James looked up at her, and the gratitude in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. "Thank you for trying." A nurse emerged from Emma's room. "Mr. Carter, your daughter is asking for you." James stood, paused, looked back at Rachel. "Will you stay? Just for a little while?" Rachel nodded. James disappeared through the double doors. 2 hours passed. Catherine Walsh came out once, got coffee from the vending machine, didn't acknowledge Rachel's presence. Robert appeared half an hour later, phone pressed to his ear, pacing while he talked to their lawyer. Rachel sat and watched families cycling through crisis, some getting good news, some bad, all of them trapped in that liminal space between hope and despair. At 8 o'clock, James emerged again, this time with Dr. Helen Morrison. The doctor was 50-ish, competent demeanor and kind eyes. "Mr. Carter has explained the financial situation. I've spoken with the hospital administration. We're willing to waive the deposit requirement and begin surgery prep tonight, with the understanding that payment arrangements will be finalized within 90 days. James's head snapped up. "What? Why would you do that?" Dr. Morrison glanced at Rachel briefly, then back to James. "Someone made a very compelling case that Emma's surgery couldn't wait for financial negotiations. Someone also offered to serve as personal guarantor for the full amount if necessary." James turned to Rachel, understanding and anger warring on his face. "You did this." "I told them I would guarantee payment. That's all. There's no money changing hands right now, no paper trail, just my word that the bill will be paid." Rachel met his eyes steadily. "You can pay it back however you want, whenever you can. But Emma gets the surgery tonight." "The Walshes will find out." "Maybe. But it's my guarantee, not my payment." "And I'm betting their lawyers will have a harder time twisting that into evidence of your inadequacy." James stood frozen for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then he turned back to Dr. Morrison. "Do it. Schedule the surgery." The doctor nodded and left. James sat down heavily, head in his hands. "I don't know if I just made the right choice or signed my own death warrant." Rachel sat beside him. "You made the choice that keeps Emma alive. Everything else is negotiable." "Not custody. That's not negotiable." "Then we'll find a way to make it work." James looked at her sideways. "We?" Rachel hadn't meant to say that. The word had slipped out, implying partnership and commitment she had no right to claim. But sitting in this hospital waiting room, watching James face impossible choices with impossible grace, she couldn't bring herself to take it back. "I'm not going anywhere." "You barely know me. I know you risked your life to save mine without knowing who I was or what I could offer. I know you're willing to lose everything rather than compromise on what matters to you. I know your daughter is the most important thing in your world, and you'll destroy yourself protecting her." Rachel's voice stayed level despite the emotion underneath. "That's more than I know about most people I've worked with for years." James was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Rachel almost missed it. "Sarah used to say that love isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting who someone is when you don't know what they'll do." "Your wife sounds like she was wise." "She was. Right up until the cancer killed her." James's voice carried old pain. "She fought for 2 extra years because she didn't want to leave Emma without a mother. The treatment bought time but destroyed quality of life. Near the end, she told me she regretted it. Not because she didn't love us, but because she realized presence doesn't count for much when you're too sick to be present." Rachel understood what he was saying. That love sometimes meant letting go, that sacrifice could become its own form of selfishness if it caused more harm than healing. Emma had articulated the same fear that morning at Murphy's. Emma's scared you'll do the same thing, that you'll let her go because you think it's the loving choice. James's head jerked up. She told you that? This morning. She said sometimes loving someone means fighting to stay together even when it's hard, not giving up because you think being apart is easier. She's 8 years old. She shouldn't have to think about things like that. She does think about them, because she's your daughter, and she understands what's at stake. They sat in silence as an hour passed, then another. At 10 o'clock, Dr. Morrison returned. We're taking Emma into surgery now. It'll be 6 to 8 hours. You should try to rest. James shook his head. I'll wait here. The doctor nodded, unsurprised. She left, and James stood, paced to the window overlooking the parking lot. Rachel stayed seated, giving him space. I don't know how to thank you for this, he said without turning around. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You put yourself at risk. If the Walshes find out you guaranteed the surgery, they could use it against you too. Claim you're trying to manipulate the custody case. Let them try. James turned finally, studied her face. Why are you doing this? And don't say because you owe me. That debt got paid when you drove me here. Rachel thought about the past 2 weeks in Seaside Cove, learning to slow down, to watch instead of always moving, to value presence over productivity. She thought about her empty penthouse in New York, her company running fine without her constant supervision, the realization that she'd built an empire but forgotten to build a life. Because watching you fight for your daughter reminded me what it looks like when someone puts people before everything else. And I've spent 20 years doing the opposite. You built a successful company. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Rachel stood, joined him at the window. I had a heart condition when I was 9. Mitral valve repair, probably similar to what Emma needs. My parents sent a check to the hospital but never visited. Not once during the 2 weeks I was there recovering. They were too busy with their careers to take time off. James's expression softened. That must have hurt. I told myself it didn't matter, that they loved me in their own way. But standing in that hospital room alone, I knew it did matter. Presence matters. Time matters. Being there when someone needs you matters more than any amount of money or success. Rachel's voice roughened. And I grew up to become exactly like them. So yes, I'm helping because I owe you. But I'm also helping because watching you refuse to abandon Emma is teaching me what I should have learned 30 years ago. They stood side by side watching car lights move through the parking lot below. After a while, James spoke again. The Walshes loved Sarah. They really did. They just loved her the way they thought they should, pushing her toward achievement, measuring her worth by accomplishments. Sarah chose me because I loved her for who she was, not what she could become. Her parents saw that as settling. He paused. They're not bad people. They just can't understand that Emma needs a father who shows up, not a trust fund that provides. Will they use this against you? The surgery? Probably. They'll say I couldn't handle the crisis, that I needed outsider intervention, that Emma would have died without their wealth as backup plan. James's jaw tightened. And they won't be completely wrong. You found a solution. That's what matters. I found someone else to solve my problem. That's different. Rachel turned to face him directly. You've been solving your own problems since your wife died. You've held this together through grief and debt and a daughter's medical crisis. Accepting help once doesn't erase 3 years of showing up every single day. The court might see it differently. Then we'll make sure they see it correctly. James met her eyes. There you go with we again. Get used to it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite acceptance, but maybe acknowledgement that Rachel wasn't leaving until this played out. He returned to the waiting room chairs, settled in for the long night. Rachel sat beside him, close enough to offer support but not touching. At midnight, Catherine Walsh appeared in the waiting room doorway. She looked at James, then at Rachel, then back to James. "Robert and I are going to a hotel. We'll be back in the morning." Her voice was controlled, but the strain showed underneath. "I want you to know, we're not trying to take Emma from you out of malice. We genuinely believe she'd have a better life with us." James's response was quiet but firm. "The best life for Emma is with her father." "Even when her father can't afford to keep her alive?" "I found a way. That's what parents do." Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. "You found a wealthy stranger to bail you out. That's not the same as providing." "She's not a stranger. She's someone who understands what Emma needs." Catherine looked at Rachel again, reassessing. "You're the woman from the yacht, the one James saved." Rachel nodded. "He risked everything to pull me out."
Now I'm returning the favor. By guaranteeing $120,000 in medical bills? That's a very expensive thank you. Compared to my life, it's cheap. Catherine studied Rachel for a long moment. "My daughter chose a man like James because she was rebelling against our expectations. She wanted to prove that love mattered more than success. And maybe it does. But love doesn't pay for heart surgery. Love doesn't ensure a child gets the education and opportunities she deserves." "No," Rachel said quietly. "But love shows up every day. Love knows Emma's favorite bedtime story and which way she likes her sandwiches cut. Love makes her feel safe even when everything is falling apart. You can buy a lot of things with money, Mrs. Walsh, but you can't buy what James gives Emma every single day." Catherine's composure cracked slightly. "Sarah said something similar, right before she cut us out of her life for 3 years. She looked at James. "We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to save our granddaughter from the poverty we escaped ourselves. Emma isn't poor, she's loved. She can be both loved and secure. Not if security means losing her father." Catherine left without responding. James slumped in his chair, exhaustion written across every line of his body. "They're going to fight this harder now. Seeing you here, seeing you guarantee the surgery, it proves their point that I can't handle crisis without outside help. Or it proves you have community support, people who care about Emma's well-being." "That's a generous interpretation." "It's the true interpretation." The night stretched on. Rachel got coffee from the vending machine, bad and bitter, but it served its purpose. James dozed fitfully, jerking awake every 20 minutes to check his phone. Rachel stayed alert, watching the slow cycle of medical personnel and worried families, this strange liminal space where normal life paused and everything narrowed to waiting. At 4 a.m, Dr. Morrison appeared, still in surgical scrubs. James was on his feet before she finished entering the room. "Emma's stable. The surgery went well. We repaired the valve and reinforced the surrounding tissue. She'll need to stay in cardiac ICU for at least 48 hours, but barring complications, her prognosis is excellent." James's legs buckled. Rachel caught his elbow, steadied him. He pulled himself together, voice shaking. "Can I see her?" "She's still under anesthesia, but yes, for a few minutes." James followed the doctor through the double doors. Rachel stayed behind, relief flooding through her so intensely it felt like pain. Emma would live. James would have his daughter. The rest was details that could be solved. James returned 20 minutes later, tears on his face that he didn't bother hiding. He sat down beside Rachel, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he reached out and took her hand. The gesture was simple, grateful, and more intimate than any words could have been. "Thank you. For everything." Rachel squeezed his hand once, then released it. "You would have found a way even without me." "Maybe."
but I'm glad I didn't have to. They sat in comfortable silence as dawn light began filtering through the waiting room windows. Rachel thought about Sterling Technologies, about Derek making moves in her absence, about board members questioning her commitment. All of it felt distant and unimportant compared to sitting here with someone who'd just fought through the longest night of his life. Her phone buzzed. Sarah, calling at 4:30 in the morning Boston time, which meant it was urgent. Rachel stepped into the hallway to answer.
Derek just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to push for a vote of no confidence. Rachel's stomach dropped. Based on what grounds? Extended absence, failure to participate in strategic decisions, inability to manage work-life balance? He's arguing that you've lost focus and the company needs leadership that's actually present. Sarah's voice was grim. Rachel, if you're not back by tomorrow morning, you might lose your company. Rachel looked through the waiting room window at James, who was staring at his hands with an expression that mixed relief and exhaustion. Emma was going to recover, but James still faced a custody hearing in 3 weeks, still needed to find a way to pay for the surgery, still had to prove to the Walshes and the court that he deserved to keep his daughter. Tell Derek I'll be there. You will? Rachel ended the call and returned to the waiting room. James looked up as she approached. Work calling? Board crisis. I need to go back to New York for a few days. James nodded slowly. I understand. You've already given more than anyone could ask. This isn't goodbye. I'm coming back. You don't have to do that. I know. Rachel pulled out her phone, typed out a message to Sarah. Actually, postpone that. Tell Derek I'll attend remotely, same as last time. She sent it before she could reconsider, then sat back down beside James, his eyebrows raised. What about your board meeting? They can wait. Emma just got out of surgery. You shouldn't have to handle the next 48 hours alone. Rachel, you're going to lose your company. Maybe, but I'm not losing this. She gestured at the space between them, the connection they'd built over 2 weeks and one impossible night. Whatever this is. James was quiet for a long time, then so quietly she almost missed it. Sarah used to say the moment you realize someone else's well-being matters as much as your own is the moment you stop being alone. Rachel thought about the past 2 weeks, about choosing to stay in Seaside Cove instead of returning to her normal life, about guaranteeing Emma's surgery despite the risks, about sitting in this hospital instead of flying back to protect her company. She'd spent 20 years building Sterling Technologies into something that would outlast her. But sitting here with James, watching dawn break over Portland, she wondered if she'd been building the wrong kind of legacy all along. The board vote came through at 10 p.m. Thursday while Rachel sat in James's kitchen helping Emma with homework. Her phone buzzed once. Sarah's text contained just 2 words. You won. Barely. Rachel set down the phone without responding. Emma looked up from her math worksheet, pencil hovering. Good news or bad news? Good news that feels complicated. That's the worst kind. Emma returned to her fractions with the focus of someone who'd learned early that some problems had clear solutions and others didn't. James emerged from the den where he'd been organizing medical supplies. The board? 6 votes to 5. I keep CEO title. Derek gets COO with expanded authority. I work remotely, half-time from Maine. Rachel's voice was flat, processing. It's exactly what I proposed. I should feel victorious. But you don't. I feel like I won permission to be half present in a life I'm not sure I want anymore. Rachel stood, walked to the window overlooking the harbor. 20 years building something, and the best outcome is being allowed to care about it less? James joined her at the window, kept his voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. You're grieving. Even when you choose to let something go, it still hurts. Is that what happened with Sarah? You knew she was dying, but it still hurt when she went? Every single day. Choosing to accept reality doesn't make reality less painful. James's reflection in the dark glass was tired,
warn. But the alternative, pretending she wasn't dying, fighting every inevitable step, that would have made the end even worse. Rachel thought about Sterling Technologies, about the company she'd built becoming something she managed at distance instead of controlled completely. The loss was real, even if it was chosen. Maybe especially because it was chosen. The custody hearing is tomorrow at 9. James's voice pulled her back. Isaiah wants you there by 8:30 to review your testimony. I'll be ready. Emma finished her homework and went to bed early, still recovering her strength. James and Rachel sat on the porch despite November cold, watching fishing boats rock at anchor, lights from the town reflecting off black water. I'm terrified, James said finally. Not of losing the hearing, of winning it and then failing Emma anyway, of proving the Walshes right by being unable to provide what she needs. You've been providing what she needs for 3 years. Medical care, stability, future opportunities, those aren't things I've been providing. Those are things I've been scrambling to cobble together through community support and lucky breaks, and now a guarantee from someone who barely knows us. James's hands gripped the porch railing. What happens when the luck runs out? Rachel chose her words carefully. Emma doesn't need luck. She needs consistency. And you've given her that every single day, regardless of circumstances. The Walshes can offer consistency too, plus resources I'll never have. They can offer material consistency. You offer something different. Rachel watched his profile in the darkness. When I was 9 and sick, my parents sent money but never showed up. I would have traded every dollar for one visit, one conversation, one moment of them choosing me over their work. Emma's not you. No, but she understands what you're giving her, even if a judge doesn't. Rachel paused. Isaiah's strategy with her artwork. Has he shown you what he's planning? Selected pieces that demonstrate emotional well-being and secure attachment. Drawings of us together, her room, the harbor, daily life. Visual testimony that she's happy and stable despite limited resources. That's good. But there's one drawing that matters most. Which one? The yacht fire. The first one she showed me at the library. Rachel turned to face him. That drawing shows a child who witnessed her father risk his life to save a stranger. That's not just about bravery. It's about values. It shows Emma understands her father helps people even when it's dangerous, even when there's no reward, because that's what good people do. James was quiet for a long moment. The Walshes will say it proves I was reckless, left my daughter alone to save someone I didn't know. Or it proves you're teaching Emma through example that some things matter more than safety, that courage means acting when action is needed, not when it's convenient. Rachel's voice strengthened with certainty. Emma doesn't just love you because you're her father. She respects you because she's watched you be the kind of person worth respecting. I hope the judge sees it that way. We'll make sure they do. They sat in silence until cold drove them inside. Rachel climbed the stairs to the small guest room, lay awake reviewing what she'd say tomorrow, refining arguments and responses. At some point, exhaustion won over anxiety, and she slept. Friday morning arrived clear and cold, November sky sharp as glass. James wore his only suit, 10 years old and slightly tight across the shoulders. Emma stayed with Martha Cole, too young to attend, which was probably mercy. Rachel dressed in a tailored outfit that split the difference between corporate power and approachable humanity. Cumberland County Family Court occupied a modern building trying too hard to look welcoming. Isaiah Brooks met them in the lobby at 8:30 sharp, briefcase in hand and tension in his shoulders. The Walshes are already here with Grayson. They brought a child psychologist and a financial analyst as expert witnesses. Isaiah led them to a consultation room. We have Walt Morrison and Dr. Helen Morrison. And you, Miss Sterling, which is either our strongest asset or our biggest liability, depending on how Grayson plays it. What's he likely to do? paint you as either a misguided savior enabling James's inadequacy, or worse, someone with ulterior motives trying to influence custody for personal reasons. Rachel had anticipated this. I'm prepared to address both narratives.
Isaiah reviewed her statement one final time, made minor adjustments to phrasing, then checked his watch. We're on. Remember, judges in family court care about child welfare above everything else. This isn't about which side wins arguments. It's about what's actually best for Emma. The courtroom was smaller than Rachel expected, less formal. Judge Margaret Holbrook presided, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd heard every manipulation tactic family law could produce. The Walshes sat on one side with Howard Grayson, perfectly composed. James and Isaiah took the other side, Rachel seated directly behind them. Judge Holbrook reviewed the file, then looked up. This is a hearing on emergency petition for custody modification filed by Robert and Catherine Walsh regarding their granddaughter Emma Carter, currently in the custody of her father, James Carter. Mr. Grayson, proceed. Grayson stood, radiating expensive competence. His opening statement painted a picture of loving grandparents worried about their granddaughter's future. He emphasized the Walshes' financial stability, their ability to provide excellent health care, educational opportunities, emotional support. He presented Emma's medical crisis as evidence that James couldn't handle emergencies without outside intervention. Mr. Carter's daughter nearly died because he lacked resources to cover a simple hospital deposit. Only the intervention of a wealthy stranger prevented tragedy. This pattern of inadequacy cannot continue. Emma deserves security my clients can provide. Isaiah's counter-argument focused on James's consistent presence, community support, Emma's demonstrated emotional well-being despite modest circumstances. He presented school records showing excellent grades, teacher evaluations praising Emma's adjustment and happiness, pediatrician notes documenting good overall health before the cardiac emergency. Then the witnesses began. Grayson called his financial analyst first, who presented spreadsheets showing James's debt-to-income ratio, late payments, insufficient savings. The numbers painted a damning picture of someone barely keeping his head above water financially. Isaiah cross-examined, establishing that despite struggles, James had never missed a mortgage payment for more than 90 days, had never defaulted on any debt, maintained Emma's health insurance without interruption. Financial stress, yes. Financial failure, no. Isaiah's voice was firm. The child psychologist testified next, presenting general principles about children needing stability and resources. But on cross-examination, Isaiah revealed she'd never actually evaluated Emma, never visited the Carter home, knew nothing about the specific situation beyond what the Walshes had told her. So your expert opinion is based entirely on second-hand information from people seeking custody? Isaiah let the question hang. Dr. Helen Morrison took the stand for James's side, providing detailed medical history showing consistent care, all appointments kept, all follow-up protocols followed. Emma's cardiac condition was genetic, not caused by neglect or inadequate care. Mr. Carter has been an exemplary medical parent. He asks informed questions, follows recommendations precisely, advocates appropriately for his daughter's needs. Dr. Morrison's testimony was clinical and devastating to Grayson's negligence narrative. Walt Morrison followed, his 72 years and weathered face carrying authority that no expert credentials could match. He spoke about watching James raise Emma alone after Sarah's death, about community members rallying, not out of pity, but respect. James Carter is the best father I've seen in 50 years living in Seaside Cove. Not because he's perfect, but because he shows up. Every morning, every night, every crisis, every ordinary day. That kind of consistency can't be bought. It's earned one day at a time. Grayson tried to discredit Walt as a biased friend, but the old fisherman's quiet dignity made the lawyer's attacks look petty. Then Judge Holbrook called a 15-minute recess. Rachel stepped into the hallway, found Catherine Walsh standing by the window overlooking the parking lot. They stood in silence for 30 seconds before Catherine spoke. You love my granddaughter.
Rachel considered denying it, decided on truth. I barely know her. But yes, in the way you can love someone's potential, their goodness, their courage. Emma has all of that. Robert thinks you're manipulating the situation, playing savior to feel important. Catherine's voice carried no accusation, just curiosity. Your husband sees manipulation because that's how he operates. I see a child who needs her father, and a father fighting impossible odds to keep her. Rachel turned to face Catherine directly. When I was 9, I had the same surgery Emma just had. My parents sent checks but never visited. I spent 2 weeks alone in a hospital wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I wasn't worth their time. Emma will never wonder that about James. That's worth more than any trust fund. Catherine's composure cracked slightly. Sarah said something similar before she cut us out of her life, that we loved her resume more than we loved her. Did she? No. She loved that we cared enough to push her toward excellence, but she hated that our care came with conditions. Catherine's eyes glistened. We're trying not to make the same mistake with Emma. We just want her to have opportunities Sarah threw away. Sarah didn't throw away opportunities. She chose different ones, and Emma's not Sarah. Rachel's voice softened. You can't rewrite your daughter's story by controlling your granddaughter's future. Catherine looked away, blinking rapidly. What if we're right, though? What if James can't provide what Emma needs? Then Emma will still have a father who tried everything to stay in her life. That's not nothing. Court resumed. Isaiah called Rachel Sterling to the stand. She took the oath, settled into the witness chair, met Judge Holbrook's measuring gaze. Isaiah began with basic questions, her name, occupation, how she knew James Carter. He saved my life. I was trapped in a burning yacht. Mr. Carter risked his own safety to pull me out, then disappeared without claiming the reward offered for his identity. Isaiah guided her through the timeline, establishing that she'd sought James out, discovered his custody situation, learned about Emma's medical needs. Then he addressed the guarantee directly. Miss Sterling, you personally guaranteed Emma Carter's surgery costs. Can you explain that decision? Rachel had rehearsed this, but sitting in the courtroom, she abandoned the corporate language Isaiah had suggested. I watched Mr. Carter face an impossible choice. His daughter was dying, and he couldn't afford the deposit to schedule emergency surgery. He could accept money from me and risk losing custody, or he could let Emma's condition worsen while he scrambled for alternatives. No parent should face that choice. So you intervened. I offered what I could without creating paper trail that would damage Mr. Carter's custody case. A personal guarantee through my foundation's protocols. Emma qualified for assistance by every objective measure: single-parent household, medical emergency, demonstrated financial need. Some might say the timing was convenient, that you manipulated foundation processes to help someone you'd developed a personal interest in. Rachel looked directly at Judge Holbrook. The Sterling Foundation exists specifically for situations like Emma's. We've provided similar grants to 43 families in the past 18 months. Emma's case was handled through the same protocols as every other emergency medical grant. The only thing unusual was my personal knowledge of the situation, which allowed faster processing during crisis. Grayson took over for cross-examination, moving with predatory confidence. Miss Sterling, you've been in Seaside Cove for nearly 4 weeks now. That's a long time for a CEO to be away from a billion-dollar company. I've been working remotely. The company has continued to perform well. Well enough that your board nearly voted you out yesterday? Rachel kept her voice level. The board voted to restructure my role, not remove me. There's a difference. A restructuring prompted by concerns about your judgment and priorities, correct? Grayson smiled. Your extended absence in Maine, your personal involvement with Mr. Carter, your guarantee of a 6-figure medical bill. These actions raised questions about your fitness for leadership. They raised questions about whether I was willing to value human beings over quarterly earnings. The answer is yes. How much time have you spent with Emma Carter? Limited time.
A few conversations, several observations at distance. And based on this limited contact, you felt qualified to guarantee her medical expenses and insert yourself into a custody dispute? I felt qualified to prevent a child from dying while her father and grandparents argued about money. Rachel's voice sharpened. My involvement isn't about custody. It's about ensuring Emma received necessary medical care without her father having to choose between his daughter's health and his parental rights. Grayson paced, building momentum. Miss Sterling, isn't it true that you've developed romantic feelings for Mr. Carter? That your judgment is compromised by personal attraction? Isaiah started to object, but Rachel spoke first. I respect Mr. Carter deeply. I'm grateful to him for saving my life. Whether those feelings constitute romance is irrelevant to Emma's well-being. So you don't deny it. I don't see how my personal feelings affect whether James Carter is a good father, which he demonstrably is, regardless of his bank balance. A good father who left his 8-year-old daughter alone at 4 a.m. to rescue a stranger? Grayson's voice dripped calculated concern. Rachel had prepared for this exact attack. A good father who was already awake and working at 4 a.m. to support his family, who saw someone in immediate danger and made a split-second decision to help, who pulled me from a burning yacht that exploded seconds after we cleared the blast radius. That's not recklessness, that's courage. And Emma understands the difference, even if you're choosing not to. The choice exposed her to risk. If Mr. Carter had died, he didn't die because he's competent and trained and knew what he was doing. Emma's father is a decorated Navy veteran who served 10 years, including multiple deployments. He's not some reckless civilian playing hero. He's someone with actual rescue training who used those skills when they were needed. Grayson shifted tactics. You mentioned Mr. Carter's Navy service. Did you know he was medically discharged for injury? Rachel hadn't known that. She kept her expression neutral. No. Injured during a rescue operation that went wrong. 3 people died. Mr. Carter was the only survivor. Grayson paused for effect. Does that sound like someone with good judgment during crisis? Isaiah objected. Relevance? This hearing is about current parenting capability, not military service from over a decade ago. Judge Holbrook sustained the objection, but the damage was done. Rachel saw James's shoulders tense, saw pain flash across his face. Grayson had found a wound and pressed it. No further questions. Grayson returned to his seat, satisfaction evident. Isaiah declined redirect, letting Rachel step down. She passed James's chair, wanted to offer support, but the courtroom setting prevented it. She took her seat behind him, watched his rigid posture, recognized the defensive tension of old trauma unexpectedly exposed. Judge Holbrook called for final statements. Grayson argued that love wasn't enough, that Emma deserved security and resources the Walshes could provide. Isaiah countered that Emma needed her father's consistent presence more than her grandparents' money. Then Judge Holbrook did something unexpected. I'm calling a 30-minute recess. I want to review Emma's artwork that was submitted as evidence. Everyone stood as the judge left the courtroom. Isaiah gathered his files, expression unreadable. James headed for the hallway without speaking. Rachel followed, found him standing by a window, jaw clenched. I didn't know about the Navy discharge. I'm sorry Grayson ambushed you with that. James didn't look at her. 3 civilians and 2 contractors died because I made a call in the field that turned out wrong. I got a medical discharge and a psych evaluation. The Navy ruled it combat stress, not negligence, but the people were still dead. That wasn't in any background check I ran, because it sealed military record. But the Walshes have connections. They dug until they found it. James's voice was hollow. And they're right. I made a choice that cost lives. What if I make another bad choice with Emma? Rachel moved to stand beside him, keeping her voice low. You made a tactical decision with incomplete information in a combat zone. That's different from parenting. Is it? Because yesterday, I chose to let you guarantee Emma's surgery even though I knew it would complicate this hearing.
That choice might cost me custody. Another decision, another consequence. You chose to keep your daughter alive. There's no universe where that's the wrong decision. James turned to look at her finally. Grayson asked if you had feelings for me. You didn't really answer. Rachel held his gaze. Because my feelings aren't the issue here. Emma's future is. Your feelings affect Emma's future if they're clouding your judgment about what's actually best for her. Are you asking if I care about you? Yes. Am I letting that cloud my judgment about Emma needing her father? No. Those are separate truths that can coexist. Rachel paused. The question is whether you trust me enough to believe that. Before James could respond, Isaiah appeared. We're being called back. The courtroom felt different as they retook their seats. Judge Holbrook had Emma's artwork spread across the bench, drawings of daily life, of the harbor, of father and daughter together. The yacht fire rendering sat on top. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony. I'm ready to rule. Judge Holbrook's voice carried the weight of someone making decisions that would reshape lives. This case presents a conflict between resource-based security and relationship-based stability. The Walshes can offer material advantages Mr. Carter cannot match. However, this court's primary concern is Emma's emotional well-being and best interests. Rachel's heart hammered. James sat motionless. I've reviewed Emma's artwork extensively. What I see is a child with secure attachment, healthy emotional processing, and clear understanding of her environment. These drawings show someone who feels safe and loved despite material limitations. Judge Holbrook picked up the yacht fire drawing. This image in particular is revealing. Emma witnessed her father risk his life to save a stranger. Rather than depicting this as abandonment or recklessness, she rendered it as heroism. That speaks to values being successfully transmitted from parent to child. Grayson started to speak, but the judge raised a hand. However, I'm also concerned about financial sustainability. Mr. Carter's ability to provide adequate medical care moving forward is questionable. The recent emergency was resolved through outside intervention, which may not be available during future crises. Judge Holbrook looked directly at James. Mr. Carter, I'm ruling in your favor with conditions. You retain full custody. The Walshes receive expanded visitation, 2 weekends per month plus alternating holidays. But I'm requiring quarterly reviews for the next year to ensure Emma's medical needs are being adequately met. Relief and tension warred on James's face. He'd won, but with ongoing scrutiny that felt like provisional victory. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering family mediation between Mr. Carter and the Walshes. This custody battle shouldn't have reached my courtroom. Emma needs both her father and her grandparents, and you need to figure out how to coexist for her benefit. Robert Walsh stood abruptly. Your Honor, if I may, you may not, Mr. Walsh. My ruling stands. Court adjourned. Everyone rose as Judge Holbrook exited. The Walshes conferred urgently with Grayson. Isaiah shook James's hand, professional satisfaction evident despite the conditional nature of the win. Catherine Walsh approached as they gathered their things. Her husband stayed back, jaw tight with anger, but Catherine moved forward alone. May I speak with you? Both of you. She looked at James and Rachel. They stepped into an empty consultation room. Catherine stood with her back straight, composure intact, but strain showing underneath. Robert wants to appeal. He thinks the judge made an emotional decision rather than a practical one. Catherine's hands twisted together. But I'm done fighting. Sarah cut us out of her life because we couldn't accept her choices. I won't make that mistake twice. James's expression was guarded. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to find a way forward that doesn't involve courts and lawyers. Emma needs her father. She also needs her grandparents. Those things aren't mutually exclusive unless we make them so. Catherine looked at Rachel. You were right earlier. We can't rewrite Sarah's story through Emma. We can only be present for Emma's own story. Robert won't agree to this, James said carefully. Robert will come around, or he won't, and I'll proceed without him. Either way, I'm asking for a chance to be Emma's grandmother without being your adversary. Catherine's voice cracked slightly. Sarah died angry at us. I can't let Emma grow up the same way. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, mediation starts next month according to the judge's order. We'll talk then. Figure out what coexistence looks like. Thank you. Catherine left, shoulders bowed with exhaustion and relief. Rachel and James stood alone in the small room. The tension from earlier, his question about her feelings, her non-answer, hung between them. I should get back to Emma. She'll want to know what happened. James gathered his coat. Thank you for testifying. For everything. Will you accept help now? Real help, not just emergency guarantees? Rachel kept her voice gentle. I don't know. The judge's quarterly reviews mean any major financial changes will be scrutinized. If I suddenly have resources I can't explain, it raises questions. Not if the resources come through legitimate channels. Sterling Foundation can formalize Emma's grant, backdate it appropriately, make it look like institutional process that happened to coincide with my personal knowledge. Rachel pulled out her phone. I'll have my legal team draw up documentation. Airtight, auditable, defensible. Why are you doing this? Because you won your custody hearing. Now you need to win the peace afterward. That means ensuring Emma gets consistent medical care without you going bankrupt providing it. Rachel met his eyes. And because I care what happens to both of you. You asked earlier if my feelings for you were clouding my judgment. Maybe they are. But my judgment says Emma needs her father healthy and stable, not stressed and drowning in debt. So regardless of how I feel about you personally, helping makes sense. James studied her face, searching for something. What happens when you go back to New York? When the novelty of small-town life wears off and you remember you've got a company to run? I restructured my role specifically so I can be here half-time. That's not a temporary arrangement. That's permanent change. For how long? Until you get bored? Until the next crisis pulls you back? The question stung because it was fair. Rachel had no track record of sustained personal commitment. Her entire adult life had been about work, with relationships as secondary concerns easily sacrificed for business priorities. I can't prove I'll stay. Not with words. Only with time and consistency. Rachel's voice was steady. But I'm asking you to trust that I'm trying to become someone different than who I was. Someone who shows up instead of sending money. Someone who values presence over profit. James looked at her for a long moment. Then quietly, Okay, let's see what happens. They drove back to Seaside Cove in separate cars, James needing space to process, Rachel giving it to him. She arrived at the small blue house to find Emma on the porch with Martha Cole, anxiously waiting. Emma ran to her father, and James caught her, held tight. It's over, sweetheart. You're staying with me. Forever? As forever as we can make it. Emma hugged him fiercely, then pulled back. Can Rachel stay too? For dinner at least? James looked at Rachel over his daughter's head, something softening in his expression. If she wants to. I'd like that. Dinner was spaghetti that Martha had prepared, simple and perfect. Emma talked non-stop, processing the day's stress through words and questions. James answered patiently, explaining mediation and visitation schedules and why Grandma and Grandpa Walsh would be visiting more regularly now. So we all have to be nice to each other? We all have to try. That's what families do. They try. After Emma went to bed, James and Rachel sat on the porch again, familiar ritual. The November night was cold enough to see breath, but neither moved to go inside. The quarterly reviews start in February, James said. 3 months to prove I can maintain stability. You will. You sound certain. I've watched you maintain stability through circumstances that would have destroyed most people. 3 more months is nothing. James was quiet, then, "There's something else. Coastal Haven Development made an offer on the harbor yesterday. They want to buy the working docks and convert them to luxury marina." Rachel's attention sharpened. "Who's behind it?" "Company called Meridian Group. They're offering double market value to anyone who'll sell. If enough people take the money, they can force a buyout of the whole waterfront." Rachel pulled out her phone, did a quick search. Her stomach dropped when she saw the corporate structure. Meridian is a subsidiary of Techron Industries, the same acquisition Derek pushed me to approve 3 months ago. "I don't understand." "Derek Morrison, my second in command, has been angling for power. The Techron deal would have given him leverage. I blocked it, so now he's going after something I care about. This town, these people. It's revenge dressed as business strategy." James absorbed this. "Can you stop it?" "Maybe, but not by throwing money around. That's Derek's game, and he's better at it than I am." Rachel thought through options, discarding corporate warfare tactics. What does the community want? To keep the docks working. Most people here have fished these waters for generations. Selling means giving up their livelihood, along with their property. Then we need to help them protect both. Not through my intervention, through their own collective action. Over the next week, Rachel worked with Walt Morrison and other community leaders to structure a cooperative that would allow local fishermen to collectively own and manage the harbor. Sterling Foundation provided a low-interest loan, $200,000 over 10 years, that gave the cooperative seed capital to buy out any members tempted to sell to Coastal Haven. Derek called her personally, voice tight with frustrated rage. "You're blocking a legitimate business transaction." "I'm facilitating community self-determination. There's a difference." "This is about that mechanic. You're letting personal involvement cloud business judgment." "This is about ensuring working families don't get displaced by luxury development they can't afford. That's not personal. That's choosing which side of history to stand on." Rachel kept her voice level. "Back off, Derek, or I'll start asking questions about how Meridian's acquisition plans just happened to target a town where I've been spending time. Corporate espionage looks bad on resumes." Derek disconnected without responding. 2 days later, Coastal Haven withdrew their offer. The cooperative vote passed 48-2. Seaside Cove would remain a working harbor controlled by the people who actually worked it. Rachel stayed in Maine through Thanksgiving, helping James host dinner for Emma and the Walshes in their first attempt at mediation outside the courtroom. The meal was awkward but civil, Catherine making genuine effort, Robert slowly thawing. "Emma tells me you're teaching her to paint digitally," Catherine said to Rachel over dessert. "Just basic techniques. She's got natural talent." Sarah was artistic too. "We pushed her toward practical pursuits. That was a mistake." Catherine looked at her granddaughter.
Emma should develop her gifts, not suppress them for someone else's vision of success. The comment was directed at Emma, but meant for everyone. Small acknowledgement of lessons learned too late with Sarah, applied soon enough with Emma. After the Walshes left, Emma helped clean up while James washed dishes. Rachel dried, the three of them moving in comfortable rhythm that felt like family, even if it wasn't formally defined. "Are you staying for Christmas?" Emma asked, carefully casual. Rachel looked at James, who kept his eyes on the soapy water but didn't object. "If your dad doesn't mind." "I don't mind." December brought the first serious snow, transforming Seaside Cove into something from a postcard. Rachel split her time between Maine and New York, the arrangement working better than she'd expected. Derek ran operations competently, proving that the company truly didn't need her constant presence. She and James developed a relationship that defied easy categorization. Not quite dating, not quite just friends. They were two people learning to be present, to value connection over achievement, to build something that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or market share. On Christmas Eve, Emma gave Rachel a drawing she'd been working on for weeks. It showed 3 figures standing on a dock, father, daughter, and a woman with dark hair. The title, written in Emma's careful printing, Family.
I know you're not my mom, Emma said quickly, but you're important, and families can be more than just blood relatives. Rachel felt tears threaten, blinked them back. This is the best gift anyone's ever given me. That night, after Emma was asleep, James and Rachel stood on the porch in falling snow. The harbor was quiet, boats covered for winter, town lights reflecting off white drifts. I need to tell you something, James said, about how I feel, about what this is between us.
Rachel's pulse quickened.
Okay?
I'm not ready for anything official. Emma's still recovering. The custody arrangement is still fragile. My life is still complicated in ways that don't make room for easy romance. James turned to look at her directly. But you've become important to me, to both of us. And I need you to know that even though I can't offer relationship in the traditional sense, you matter. What you've done, who you've become while you've been here, it matters.
That's enough, Rachel said quietly. More than enough.
Is it? Because you gave up a lot to be here. Your company, your position, your old life. And what you're getting in return is a complicated man with a sick daughter and a mortgage he can barely pay. That's not a fair trade.
Love isn't supposed to be fair trade. It's supposed to be choosing someone's well-being, even when the math doesn't make sense. Rachel smiled. You taught me that.
By refusing money you desperately needed because accepting it would hurt Emma. By risking your life for a stranger you didn't know. You showed me what it looks like when someone makes choices based on values instead of advantage. James reached out, took her hand. Sarah used to say that real strength isn't refusing help. It's knowing when to accept it without letting it define you. She was right. She usually was. James squeezed her hand once, then released it. I'm accepting your help. The foundation grant, the cooperative loan, all of it. Not because I'm weak, but because Emma deserves the stability those resources provide. But I need you to understand, I'm not accepting you because of what you can provide. I'm accepting you because of who you are, separate from your bank account.
I know.
They stood together in falling snow. Not quite romance, but something deeper. Partnership, built on respect and shared values, and the slow accumulation of days spent showing up for each other. 6 months passed. Emma's quarterly review in February went smoothly, the judge satisfied with medical compliance and financial stability. The March review was even better, Emma's cardiologist reporting excellent progress. By June, Judge Holbrook ended the monitoring period, ruling that ongoing oversight was unnecessary. The Walshes visited monthly, relationship with James slowly healing through Emma's determined bridge building. Catherine became someone who could be trusted with Emma's care. Robert remained stiff but made genuine effort, showing up for school events and medical appointments without trying to control every decision. Rachel sold 70% of Sterling Technologies to Techron in August, a different deal than Derek had proposed, but one that accomplished similar goals. She retained control of the foundation and strategic direction, stepped away from operational oversight entirely. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked during the final contract review. This is everything you built. It's everything I built when I measured success in market share and quarterly growth. Now I measure differently. Rachel signed the papers without hesitation. I'm choosing presence over profit, relationships over revenue, life over legacy. The money from the sale was substantial, $2 billion after taxes. Rachel established trust funds for Emma's education and medical care, donated $500 million to the foundation, invested the rest in community development projects in coastal Maine. On a warm evening in late September, James took Rachel to a quiet spot above the harbor where Sarah's ashes had been scattered. They stood looking out at fishing boats returning to dock, gulls wheeling overhead, the town spread below them in golden light. Sarah would have liked you, James said, not because you're rich or successful, because you were brave enough to question everything you built and strong enough to walk away
when you realized it wasn't serving you. I didn't walk away. I redirected. Same thing. Takes courage either way. James pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Emma's only 9, and we've only known each other 10 months. But I'm asking you to stay. Officially. Move to Seaside Cove permanently. Help me raise my daughter. Build a life together that isn't defined by what we have, but by who we're becoming. Rachel looked at the ring, then at James, then at the town below where she'd found something she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing it. Connection. Purpose. Presence. Yes. To all of it. To staying, to building, to whatever comes next. She held out her hand, and James slipped the ring on her finger, but on one condition. What's that? Next time you rescue someone from a burning yacht, you tell me about it before Emma draws a picture that gives everything away. James laughed, the sound carrying across the water. Deal. They walked back down to town hand in hand, the promise ring catching late sunlight. Emma was waiting on the porch with a new drawing, 3 figures, properly proportioned this time, standing together with the harbor behind them. She'd titled it simply, Home. Rachel looked at the drawing, at Emma's proud smile, at James's quiet contentment, at the small blue house that had become the center of her world. She thought about the yacht fire, about the stranger who'd risked everything to save her, about the chain of choices that had led from that burning water to this moment of peace. Some rescues happen in minutes. Others take months. But the ones that matter most aren't about being pulled from danger. They're about finding your way to safety through the daily choice to be present, to show up, to value connection over achievement. Rachel Sterling had spent 20 years building an empire. But standing on that porch in Seaside Cove, watching the sun set over water she'd nearly died in, she understood, finally, that the things worth building couldn't be measured in market cap or quarterly growth. They were measured in Emma's art, in James's trust, in a community that welcomed her not for what she could provide, but for who she was choosing to become. They were measured in moments like this, ordinary, unremarkable, and more valuable than any billion-dollar acquisition. Rachel had been rescued from a burning yacht, but the real rescue had taken 10 months, involved a whole town, and saved her from something more dangerous than fire. A life spent achieving everything while meaning nothing. She was home now. Finally. Actually, home.